and I quote, "I'll be there in a minute. Give me a second."
Time is relative, folks. Time is relative.
Yes. So, hey, cheers to everybody in the chat.
They're a division rival. I don't care how many wins they get. Screw them.
That wasn't the take I was expecting to hear.
I want to gush over watching live Chris Tanev.
I think that we completely underestimate the skill it takes to play defense.
One highlight or several highlights does not a Calder trophy make.
I'm stepping in here. I'm going to be the crotchety old man here. They need to learn patience. They need to understand the tension, everything, and the drama.
How dare! Look at this. How is McDavid not getting a penalty?
You guys need to calm down with this, okay? You guys need to calm down with it.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the Shifts and Pucks podcast. You can follow us on Twitter at Shifts and Pucks, Facebook.com Shifts and Pucks, YouTube.com Shifts and Pucks, Twitch.com Shifts and Pucks. Subscribe wherever you get your audio, as well as on the Area 51 Sports Network. As as we are in a hold on. Well, I guess technically, depending on where you are, 2 days before Christmas, if you're watching this in the early mornings of Friday, but we're 3 days away from Christmas as we're recording this live, 8:45 Mountain Time. I have a reason for saying that in a second, Sean. How are you doing?
Good, Kev. I'm 3 days away from Christmas. I got 2 more days of work, and I'm ready to indulge in some Christmas festivities.
Yeah, I actually work on Christmas, so but I work early. I work at the morning shift, so it's going to be fine. I am wearing a toque and a parka, as it is damn cold in Vancouver this week. It has been crazy cold. We're actually, as of right now, I'm about to say something that's going to make a lot of Canada laugh. -6, but really that feels like -16. But it's been colder than that. It's been -18 at some points. It's been a really cold week. The roads have been brutal. They've told people today in BC, don't travel if you don't have to on the highways. It's been some kind of fun on the roads in BC, and I know it's very cold in Calgary. I think, what is it, -604 or something right now?
It's -28 before the wind chill.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
We've set a couple records for coldest days, like coldest December 20th. Since they were keeping records. Yeah, we've been hitting -40 with wind chills this week, and that's not fun.
No, it isn't. It's been a terrible winter, wintry weather. I mean, even out east, it's been pretty brutal. With the Great Lakes, it's cold all across wherever we are. So stay warm, stay safe. I'm just gonna say this once: don't drink and drive, and wherever you do over the Christmas holiday. Do it safely, have fun, and all of that sort of stuff. But we got some hockey to get into, and I have a beef with Alberta, Sean. As a former Albertan, I got a little bit of a
what do we do now?
Okay, so there's the Flames are on the road this week in California, and all of the games happen to start at 8:30 Mountain Time. Or a little bit later. And a bunch of you folks out there are blaming the National Hockey League for something that's not the National Hockey League's fault. The games in California start at 7:30 Pacific because that's the way it is in LA. The Clippers start at 7:30. The Lakers start at 7:30. I think there's only one weekday home game that the Kings start at a different time other than 7:30. That's when games start in LA. It's 7:30. It works for them. Now, I get that it's a little late for the folks in Alberta, but there are a lot of Eastern folks that were that have games start 8 o'clock local their time, and I don't hear the bitching and complaining about times there. Well, except for Steve Simmons, of course. But other than that,
Are you
very
kidding
rare.
me? You hear that all the time.
I don't hear that much at all.
It's been that way all the time. There, Kevin. Yes, the 7:30 starts in LA. Well, let's just call it the Los Angeles metropolitan area, so it includes the Anaheim Ducks as well, and even San Jose. I think they start at 7:30 as well. Most games. So that is it. But there has been a couple like weird 8:30 starts for the Flames at home.
Wasn't there as I take off my jacket because it is actually hot? Wasn't there a playoff game? Yeah, the playoff game. The Battle of Alberta that started at 8:30, didn't it? At some point.
Oh,
yeah, the game we're starting at 8:45 your time.
Well, that's okay. That now we can start talking legit beefs here. If you advertise that the game starts at a certain time, the game should start at a certain time, not this 8:30 and then this actually starts at 8:42.
Yeah, that I grant and agree with all of that. And TNT has made that really bad with their 20-minute long diatribe in between the games as they try to rag the puck between their double headers. Like that I'm not a big particularly huge fan of, but
that's been this what time is the advertised start time is never the actual start time. It's before TNT. That's just the way we seem to do it here with the NHL. I don't know. I haven't paid much attention with basketball and really NFL or anything like that too closely to that. But with NHL, yeah, if it's in 6 o'clock advertised start, you're actually starting closer to 6:15.
Yeah, the NFL they put the start time at the actual start time. So if it's 1:25, it's a 1:25 start. They start at 1:25, and what they do, and maybe the NHL needs to consider this a little bit, is they do the national anthem 5 minutes before the game starts, and then they start the game. As opposed to what the NHL does is they have the start time of the broadcast, right? And yeah, so maybe that's something that needs to entirely change. But I mean, there's been a lot of talk about what is going forward with the schedule anyway, and that's one thing that I think everybody, that's an interesting thing as well. And I mean, there have been weird times this year, even with the Monday night hockey too, because there's a few 7:30 starts in Vancouver. And I don't necessarily think for Vancouver that is a great start time overall. I think 7 o'clock is a better start time. And that's because you have the way that it works in Vancouver. Of course, for those that don't live out here, you've got so many people driving from elsewhere to get to the games. If they actually go to the games, that's a whole other issue right now. But in terms of, 7 o'clock instead of 7:30 would be a much better start overall for a weekday time. But the way where you're doing these Monday night hockey doubleheaders, there have been some 7:30 starts.
Yeah, so you're more talking about the going home, so they're not driving home later.
Yeah.
As opposed to, because I'm saying that gives them more time to get there.
Right, but then you're heading 7:30, 10. Head home. Like if you're in Surrey, that's still a 30-40 minute drive at least, right? So
yeah, I don't know. I think that's, if you're going out to the game, you know that it's going to be a bit of a later thing, so later night. So if it's an extra half hour, I don't know. But it's like if it's an 8:30 start, like here we've had 8:30 starts at the Dome. And that's kind of ridiculous on a weekday if you're trying to keep the kids out.
Yeah. I that part I understand, but like just from the perspective of like, for Calgary, complaining about Calgary games at 8:30, I don't have an issue. I get it, but I think complaining about games starting at another what works better for that fan base, that's where I have to push back, because that's not the NHL fault. That really is an LA California thing, that they want to start things at 7:30.
I'm gonna borrow a Chris phrase. Twitter will Twitter.
Yeah, that's true.
That's where people go to complain about everything. So I don't think it's a real, honestly, Kev, I don't think it's a real like snapshot on how people feel about the start times.
But I did want to bring that up because I do think that sometimes we forget that there's other perspectives in this conversation when people are
What? No, my perspective's the only perspective, Kevin.
That's
Come
true.
on, get
That's
right
true.
with get with it.
That's fair. Yeah. But so that I wanted to get out of the way. Speaking of starts, I guess this leads us to the Vancouver Canucks, who at this point 1-1 with the Seattle Kraken. You know, as
Petey
we're
from Petey.
Petey from Petey, yeah. Lane Pettersson found money in the Ethan Bear trade, who was scratched today for some reason. Do we start there? Do we start with the... Okay, let me ask you a question. Because we had this conversation back, I want to say in November, around Bruce Boudreau. And just from my observation of watching the Canucks lately, this feels like a team waiting again for something to happen. It's a fan base waiting for something to happen too. But have you changed your mind at all at Bruce Boudreau? Have you changed your mind and thinking, okay, are you more to the point where it's time for a coaching change, or are you willing to say, let's stick it out, or are we on borrowed time with Bruce Boudreau? Is he at the point now? Are we at the point of a conversation of it's not if, it's when?
It is not if, it's when with Bruce Boudreau, unfortunately. But I don't think that's necessarily all his fault. Whatever the mix on this team is not right. The blue line and defensive structure of this team, period. If you take the personnel of the blue line out of it, I don't think the defensive structure, which includes the forwards, is good enough. So, and I just think it's time for a change, and I don't think it's I think it's time for a change. Period. Shouldn't stop at the coach this time. It's time to really shake this team up and make some big moves. Which at this point you're looking at again, which will lead into another topic later on. But who's a tradable asset that will do that for the Canucks? Who are the tradable assets? And the list is short, unfortunately, in terms of who's going to bring back significant returns. So, but the best before date on this roster is past, and it's time to make major surgery on this roster.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. And I don't know how it's a very stale roster. It doesn't feel like an engaged roster, and it needs to just cut out pretty much everything. I mean, you've got a situation with Brock Besser. You had that report out about his agent allowed to seek a trade. You've got the very, and almost the best way to say this, unfortunately, is to say it's a lame duck captain in a lot of ways in Bo Horvat, because we know what's the next step. We think, or we assume that the next step is Bo is leaving.
Before we move on there, Kev, I hate that term.
I know
lame duck, whatever. Because if you're a fucking good hockey player with heart and grit, it doesn't fucking matter if your captain needs a new contract, your coach needs a new contract. So I'll call that term, that phrase out every time someone says it, because I don't think that's a fair way of putting it, because The only one I will say is a lame duck is the GM, because then other GMs know that, and then you can. They're going to try and drop anvils on this GM, but when it comes to coaches, and then now if you're going to extend that to captains, that's crap.
Okay,
that's more of an issue on the players aren't following the captain and coach, as opposed to the captain and coach.
Okay, there's certainly. Okay, I can't find another word for it, but there certainly seems to be a way. There's something not right there. Whatever it is, it's not. The mix isn't working. They're not responding. Whatever that is. You also have a guy that you gave eight years to that hasn't started to live up to the contract, and that could be adjustment. That could be entitlement. There could be a lot more things going on with JT Miller, but that certainly, his overall play has not helped the situation. I think that, and I'm a JT Miller fan, and I can't sit here and defend JT Miller's play, like, not objectively, not honestly. I can't. He hasn't been good enough this year at all. Yeah, and you've had a number of injuries also as well. You've had the Thatcher Demko injury. You've had other play. You've had Petey's been out for a few games. You've had Besser's fought through injuries. You've had a number of injuries as well. But it just feels like it doesn't feel like the Canucks play with a lot of engagement and energy overall. And
it feels like it feels like they're just they will for spurts, but it feels like they can't create it on their own. Like they'll get a bounce, and they'll get a goal, and they'll play with energy for a little bit, but they can't create it on their own, because they always seem, if they could, they would start better.
Yeah. Yeah, and
just to also clarify, it was a $8 million times 7-year deal for JT Miller.
Right. Sorry. It was a lengthy enough. It was the contract that pissed everybody off, though, and certainly, okay, I said it wrong. I think we both agree he's not playing to what that contract expectation is. I don't think I'm speaking out of term if it's 8 or 7. It's not. Just not.
No. That contract hasn't even kicked in yet.
Yep.
And players have off years and down years. So like, I'm not willing to write that contract off as an absolute, the next like Louis Eriksson type deal yet, but it just doesn't look good right now. But he's still producing points. It's just it's all on like power play, and his 5-on-5 play is not good, and he just needs to figure that out. But I also think that maybe this system that Boudreau is trying to implement maybe doesn't put him in a situation and makes him feel like he has to do more than he should, which is making JT Miller make these absolute boneheaded giveaways and passes that just aren't good, like just not good enough for NHL, let alone someone who's going to be making $8 million a year starting next year.
And just to add to this, because we've had this conversation with Jonathan Huberdeau, and I thought there was a really interesting point made this week on the Merrick Show about Huberdeau. And I'll blend it to Miller in a second. Some people think it's going to take the entire season for Jonathan Huberdeau to really get fully adjusted to Calgary. Maybe in a lot of ways, the adjustment, and we sort of saw this with Bo Horvat when he got the captaincy. He had to adjust. There's an adjustment with that contract expectations that you almost feel that you have to end up doing more than you need to be doing. And I think that I wonder if that's in part of that is playing into it as well. I'm not making excuses, but I think that that's part of, there's an adjustment there. Like, 32 teams, like for Canucks fans, 32 teams would love to have a JT Miller on their team. There's like, other than the current contract and the current financial climate, a lot of teams would love to have JT Miller. You're right, Sean. You don't write him off. It's just right now, if things were better with JT Miller, there would be probably the Canucks results would be a lot better.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if Miller could have held his own as a center, which has been the biggest downfall this year, the Canucks would have been able to roll those three lines that we were hoping they would be able to start the season. And yeah, I think they would have been having better results, as opposed to now where it really has become a bit of like you've got the Pettersson line, and then when Bo Horvat, and then a mismatch of everyone else.
Yeah. You're getting everyone else, I would say, has been inconsistent. Dakota Joshua has shown flashes. Jack Studnicka, I think, has shown flashes, but not enough. He was scratched. Defensively, yeah, we know the blue line hasn't been the strength of the team overall, so that's fair. Yeah, so I guess ultimately just it really is time to get a fresh idea and a fresh voice in that locker room, and from the player's perspective, not necessarily only from a coach perspective. And I don't know where you go with a coach at this point. If
you're going to fire Boudreau, who's next?
Yeah, you're probably bringing in Mike Yeo as the interim, and then you're searching for another coach, and then you have that other question of having another coach on the books for in the payroll here, because you're still paying Travis Green, you're still paying Jim Benning, and I believe you're still paying John Weisbrod. So I can't imagine that the Aquilinis would be super happy about paying Boudreau for not working. So yeah, it's kind of it's a stuck situation, but I think that this management.
But the other thing there, Kev, with all that is Boudreau's contract's only till the end of this year, so that's only like you're not paying him past this season. I don't know how long Benning's contract was. I don't think it was that much longer after this here, and we don't know about Weisbrod, and I don't think it's his contract was significant enough to be thrown in there. And we have heard multiple reports that that's not an issue for Alvin and Rutherford to pull the trigger on a coaching change.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough. But I guess all of these things are what's kind of looming within the whirlwind. I guess that's where I guess how you build this team going forward becomes the question. And I think Benning's off the books this year, I believe, if I read this correctly.
So then and that's why it's not a big deal. And then even if Weisbrod was tied to Benning, again, he'd be tied to him, so it doesn't matter. After this year, they got everyone off the books except for Travis Green, I think.
Yeah, so you can start and build But I guess the part I guess that became a little bit more interesting this week is a report from Elliot Friedman that only Elias Pettersson is currently the only untouchable at this particular point within the Vancouver Canucks lineup. Which originally, when we heard from Rutherford, it was originally Pettersson, Hughes, and Demko. And now it's just, according to Friedman, Pettersson. And I want to start by saying I think that would take this with a little bit of a grain of salt. Not that I don't respect Friedman, but it still would take a massive haul to get out Quinn Hughes if you're doing it at all. And I personally think that that's a very, very risky trade, even if you get a massive haul. And even Thatcher Demko, I'd be weary of trading Thatcher Demko.
Yeah, but I think just because there's only one quote unquote untouchable doesn't mean that like the Demkos and the Hughes, the Demko and Hughes are like, it would take a freaking like king's ransom, the earth, the moon, and the stars to get them, right? So the price is still going to be like astronomically high to get one of those players. So I don't like, they're essentially untouchable too, unless someone's willing to basically pull a New Orleans Saints and trade their whole draft board for Ricky Williams, like back using an NFL term there. But I don't see it realistically happening.
Yeah.
So like it's just calm your tits. Hughes and Demko are essentially untouchable at this point, unless someone comes with an absolutely, you cannot say no, you cannot look a gift horse in the mouth offer. And hell, I would. It's literally PD untouchable, and then the half step below are those two.
Yep.
So
That's
just
fair.
let's stop hand wringing. Let's stop getting all upset about that. It's the truth is those two are not going anywhere. Like realistically here, there's no team that's going to give up what it's going to take to get to pry either of those players out of Vancouver.
No. But I guess, yeah. So, I mean, you're ultimately still building your team around Pettersson, Hughes, Demko, ultimately. And I guess then it becomes the point of what, I guess, the options are in terms of if, and I really still should say if you're trading Bo Horvat. Not that I don't like, in one hand, it feels like it's a foregone conclusion, but we've seen stranger things happen. We thought JT Miller was gone, and JT Miller signed. It's possible Bo Horvat could still sign a contract. But I guess in terms of trade options, I guess the standard would be first round pick, prospect, etc. But like really, like with this would be an opportunity to build something, right? To get something significant to build for the future if you're moving on from Bo Horvat. So,
well, that's what they're looking for, because the other report is that the Canucks want to do a hockey trade.
Yeah.
And I think that might be the Canucks might be looking for a Ryan Johansson, Seth Jones deal.
So let's look at the Seth Jones trade. That was
It was Ryan Johansson for Seth Jones.
Oh, you meant that type of trade, right?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, I thought you meant the Seth Jones trade from Columbus to Chicago.
No.
Okay, sorry.
No, I think the Canucks should be looking more long term at this point, but if they're able to get a young defenseman that they can build the defense around along with Quinn Hughes, I don't see why not. Why you don't look at that as an option, especially if it's a right shot defenseman.
Yeah, that's an idea. Yeah,
I just don't know who's out there that would fit that, and that teams would be willing to give up for Bo Horvat. Because I think at that point you'd have part of that deal would be, depending on who's coming back, would likely have to have an extension in there.
Yeah, it was one thing that I was thinking about, and I don't know if this works, but similar. I wonder if there's a way similar to the Matthew Tkachuk trade where the Flames actually signed Tkachuk and traded him to Florida. Could that be an option with Horvat, that you do some sort of sign and trade?
I could see that. Yeah, I could see that. I could see basically everything on the table for the Canucks with that, because they're going to want to get someone a defenseman who's probably 26 or younger in this deal. If they're going to do it that way. But like when you look at that, who's available that makes sense? And because you've got especially if it's a right shot defenseman, I'm not sure there's anyone that's available.
I'm just going through my head right now. Who would need a? To me, here, who would need a center? Just off the top of my head, I think Washington needs a center. I think Minnesota could absolutely use a Bo Horvat. Like, I think before I go on with this, all 32 teams would want a Bo Horvat. But then, like, I think Washington makes some sense. Minnesota makes some sense to me. And they do have defense depth that could be interesting. Colorado is as another name in there, and there is a ton of depth there for sure. Then you also, Frank Cervelli threw the idea of Boston. But
Boston's the only one that has a defenseman that's has defenseman that would be, I think I'd be interested in. Well, and maybe Minnesota and Kalen Addison, but again, like I'm looking at that, and there's no one that I'm willing to do that trade 1-for-1 for Bo Horvat. So there would have to be more coming back as well. That's like realistically available, right?
Yeah,
that's what I'm trying to say. Because like Boston's got Brandon Carlo, who's a good tough defenseman, but I'm not. Then that Kalen Addison's younger, but he's also a undersized defenseman, and the Canucks already have a puck moving undersized defenseman in Quinn Hughes. So I'm not sure if that works with the mix. So I don't know. I don't see that happening. I think this might be more of a Alvin and Rutherford trying to play the media to try and see if, what leaves they can shake loose on from other teams. But I still think it's going to be a 2 to depending on what the main piece is, a 2 to 3, maybe even 4-piece deal.
Yeah. Yeah, and I wonder if it's another team has to get involved and has to broker this too. In some way,
I mean, depending how close they are to the deadline when they make the deal. Like Bo Horvat's only 5.5 on the cap, or like he's not that. His contract for this season is not that onerous at all. If another team needs a team to broker through, okay, but I don't necessarily think that's I don't think that's going to happen. Be needed if it's closer to the deadline.
Yeah, it's just because it just feels like everything is just kind of stuck in. I think a lot of teams want to make moves, right? But it's right now, it's just, and I think a lot of the defense market, I think, is interesting because you still have the Jacob Chychrun situation where I think everybody's kind of keeping an eye on that. But you also have you look at Devon's Toronto Maple Leafs. I mean, for the love of God, they're dropping like flies there. They're going to need defensemen as they go down the stretch run. That market is going to be very heavy.
And I can't wait to hear all the Bo Horvat comes home, should come home to Toronto talk leading up to the deadline and into the summer. That's typical Toronto. So
yeah. Well, I mean, the only one reason I thought Horvat would be a good fit in Toronto is I think that they were wanting to move Tavares to left wing, and that would give you the option to do it. But at the same time, I don't know if the Leafs have what it would take to make that move. I mean, it's Alex Kerfoot would become obvious.
But he's just a body in that trade. Like he's not worth anything in that trade.
And then so then Timothy Liljegren becomes an option because he's the right shot defenseman. And is he healthy? That's my question. I don't know if I don't think Toronto is
and Kerfoot as you're still adding 2 more pieces in that.
Yeah,
because Kerfoot's essentially a cap dump for the Leafs in that deal. And that's I hate that because I think he's a useful player, but he's essentially a cap dump.
Yeah, I'm just looking at their draft situation too, because I mean, you're obviously they
First would have to be involved there.
Yeah. And I mean, the whole question about if you're giving up a first this year, and I think teams will eventually do that as the trade deadline comes through. But the Leafs,
once they figure out that they're not going to be in the lottery, and it'll still be a lottery protected pick.
Well, if the Leafs give up the first this year, they don't have a first and a second this year for a trade. They would have 2 3s. They have their owns and Ottawa's. They don't have a fourth. They would actually, if they trade that first, they would have 4 picks in one of the historically premium drafts. I don't know if the Leafs would really want to do that, but
is it really? Are we really going that way, like that hyperbolic over this draft?
I mean, all I will say is I haven't heard this much hype around a draft since probably 2003. I mean, eventually we're going to have to look back and see where we are at with this draft, but it's a really good draft.
Is there hype around the draft after like the first 15 though? That's always my question with draft and all the hype people give them. It's like it always feels like it comes down to whether or not the top end of the draft is good. Because I think that if the top end of the draft is good, it gets all the hype. If it's average, it doesn't. It still gets hype, but it doesn't. Because I would say, yeah, I'd really be interested to see how these drafts play out based off of from 15th, 20th overall after.
Well, my question with this draft overall is the quality of defensemen available for it. It's definitely very forward strong with Bedard, Fantilli, Mitchkov, Yager, Zach Benson. There's not the highest ranked defenseman in Sportsnet is Mikhail Guliev of Omsk. It's not defenseman strong.
Yeah,
that's the one thing I would say. But I mean, if you're looking for a forward, this is the draft for you. But if you're thinking you need to fill your
again,
defense,
all you've listed off is like top 10 players, and you could do that with every draft.
Yeah, there's Cone Zimmer. I think is going to be. I think he's got he's ranked 23rd. I think that's will be a good find. As is Luka Dragovic from Tri-Cities.
But do you understand where I'm coming from, Kev?
Yeah.
When we make all these like hyperbolic comments about a draft, and in all reality, it's all because of the top end.
This has the most intrigue. This is probably the most intriguing draft we've had in a while. I will say that, and it's also.
I will agree with that statement.
Yeah. But yeah, in terms of I see what you're saying in terms of where it ends up in terms of historic, in terms of where it is history. I mean, I just think there's a lot of excitement for this draft, and it is beyond Connor Bedard. There is some really good players in this draft other than Connor Bedard, too, which is where everybody's focus is. And of course, there's Adam Fantilli as well. But there's still it has a chance to be a really strong draft. That's what I'll anyway. But anyway, the point being, that the one question is the first round picks, which I think at the trade deadline when you have a chance to go for a cup, you'll do it because what does Devin always say? Banners fly forever.
Yeah, that's what kind of where I was also trying to get at is for the Leafs are in win now mode. First and second round picks, using first round picks for drafting players may not be the best way of using them for the Leafs at this current moment.
Right. And that will be a late first anyway, right? So
mm-hmm.
Yeah. And The other interesting question with this Horvat thing is Ryan O'Reilly is out in this as well, and I mean, it depends on
the ghost of Ryan O'Reilly.
yeah, and St. Louis is the second weirdest team in the National Hockey League right now, right just behind the Vancouver Canucks. I don't know what to make of the Blues. Like sometimes they look really good, and other times they look completely off. So I don't know what to make of that entire team and what they're going to do. So, and I guess you have to have that question of what you're going to do with Ryan O'Reilly though as well from a St. Louis perspective, and what is that? What are you willing to get? And what do you want? Do you want Bo Horvat or do you want Ryan O'Reilly? I mean, I would want Bo Horvat
for a player. Yeah, that's what I was saying. I think step above Ryan O'Reilly at this point.
I'm with you.
And like Ryan O'Reilly he's not the same O'Reilly that he was 3 years ago. He's 31. Like, and he's got hard miles on him. So I think O'Reilly's still going to fetch a decent price, but I think he's the consolation prize for teams that don't get Bo Horvat.
Yeah. I guess the O'Reilly, to just play devil's advocate here just for a quick moment, the O'Reilly argument is he brings Stanley Cup playoff experience, which Horvat does not have. But if you're from the Horvat perspective, he's going to show up for the playoffs. You damn well know that.
He already has.
Yeah.
In the limited experience that he does have, he has shown up.
Yeah.
And he's the way he's playing right now. Why would I don't see why he would disappear. And he's younger. He's strong. I think he's younger, stronger, and faster than Ryan O'Reilly is currently, and a better hockey player all around.
And what you're all saying here, I guess this is where I struggle, and if I'm the Canucks, you got to try to take one more kick at the can at this, though. I get that you are going to want a haul for Bo Horvat, but my issue is, are you going to get a Bo Horvat type of player back?
Because you never know with those trades. If you're going to go futures, you never know. But the other thing, though, Kev, is like we've talked about it. This team is broken.
Yes, it is.
If you continue to say, if you continue to just say, well, if you're not going to get a Bo Horvat back, then what the hell are you doing? Like, and it's like, okay, maybe you trade JT Miller. You're going to have to pay someone to take JT Miller off their hands right now with that contract. So at some point, you're going to have to cut bait and to make a tough decision. What other tangible assets do the Canucks have that can bring back draft picks, young players that can help make this team better in the future? What other like you said, we talked about Quinn Hughes. The price, the acquisition cost for a team to get Quinn Hughes is astronomical. No one's going to want to pay that because that's how valuable he is. Thatcher Demko. Goaltenders are weird. Okay, we haven't quite figured them out, and I don't think teams are willing to give up a lot of assets for a goalie. So who's left? Who's left to make the change on this team?
I totally understand where you're coming from, but all I'm saying is that it is a significant.
That's what they need, though. That's what this team needs. They need to be slapped upside the head and woken up to say, stop being so comfortable. Figure your shit out, or you're getting shipped out. We just shipped out your captain. That's what that might be what they need. And it's not like they're going to get peanuts for him. They're going to get a haul for Bo Horvat. If they can find a way to sign him and then trade JT Miller for assets, I'd be all for it. I just don't see it happening.
Yeah, I'm with you. I understand. I understand. I think it's I think this is, to me, I guess it's so unfortunate, but this is a guy that has done absolutely everything asked for by Bo Horvat for this organization. He has done it all. He's done everything he's possibly can. I I think that they're going to miss him a lot, and I like
No, I agree. I just don't.
that is the sad part of this situation is they, as an organization, like, everyone has kind of ripped on the Oilers for the McDavid Draisaitl and not taking advantage of having two premier players. I think that that's very arguable that the Canucks have kind of missed that boat too. Not, of course, they're not McDavid Draisaitl. That's not what I'm saying. But Bo Horvat is a guy that you can win championships with and go on long playoff runs with. And I just feel that they missed an opportunity with that.
But the rest of the team is not good. And
No.
how the only other player that you're going to be able to get assets for would be Kuzmenko. But I just look at that but again, that's not necessarily a big culture change, because that's something he's barely been with the Canucks. He's been with the Canucks for less than a season. That's what the Canucks need is a massive culture change in the locker room.
I don't disagree with you. I agree with you.
Since they lost Tanev and Markstrom, they just the locker room has not worked. It might be time to move on here. It's either that or they have to find a way. It's either that or they have to find a way to move salary elsewhere so they can afford to sign Bo Horvat and extend Pettersson as soon as fucking possible. Which he's available. He's eligible for a extension come July 1st.
Yeah.
So the only way that it makes sense to do that is if they are able to move out of Myers and OEL to make the money work. But even then, I look at this team and I'm just like, why is it that there's something broken with this mix?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I totally agree with you. I'm totally with you. And I think that people have stepped in, like Ethan Bear's comments this week about how, about the culture on this team. Luke Shen has made the comment. Like, you're right. I totally agree with you. Like, there needs to be a massive culture change and massive change within this roster. And the human part of me loves I love Bo Horvat as a player. And I kind of feel that he's been jilted a little bit. And I feel like the Canucks took advantage of a guy that really gave a lot to this organization.
How do they take advantage of him?
I don't think they ultimately.
Is it? I think a missed opportunity to build a team around him is
Yes.
that, but I don't think that's taking advantage of him. Because for me, taking advantage of someone is more of a personal sort of a slight as opposed to just not building a team properly. Building a team properly is more business than anything else, and just then you could say that about a lot of teams with their star players.
Okay, and the one way that I could see it is I wonder how he felt that they signed Miller before him.
That's the only, but I think that might be just more of a. I think that to me right now, that is the biggest question mark on this management group right now, is that the fact that they went and chose to. They prioritized signing Miller over Horvat. I don't think that's taking advantage of Horvat, but I think that's just. But he has every right to be upset if he is upset about that.
Yeah, that's the one area and maybe I'll save this, but I think just the whole conversation about going forward of just a future. We'll put this in the future. We won't have this discussion tonight. Just about where and how that captaincy is worn in Vancouver. And it's not a criticism of Bo. I'm not criticizing Bo Horvat when I'm saying that, but I do think that there's some very interesting. That's a very interesting discussion to me as we go forward. What you do with that captaincy. But I mean, if you have a thought on it.
Okay, I'll just put it this way. That is it's such a tough market to be a captain in.
Yep.
Especially when you're middling and not winning. It doesn't matter who you put that letter on, they are going to struggle a lot. Because
it's days of our Canucks here. It really is.
The fans, the media, they're out for blood right now because they haven't seen success. And until they see success, they're going to attack whoever the hell they want.
Yep.
Even if it's completely wrong and misguided.
Yep. But it's a fascinating, it's an interesting idea, I guess, where I think you and I we'll probably end up in the same place, but we'll save that because I'd like to hear from Tyler, Chris, and Devin on that one for sure, as well. And I think it's a lengthier conversation too. Do we want to? We wanted to touch on the Abbotsford Canucks. Niels Höglander sent down. Podkolzin sent down. But they didn't get a point in their last games. But
Podkolzin had points in his last game.
Oh, did he? Okay, sorry.
Last night, yeah.
Last night he did. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I listened to Faber yesterday. I didn't listen to him didn't see today, but this is a team, I think it's good that Höglander's down there. I think it's good that Podkolzin's down there. And I think what is also looking good is, while some may criticize the fact that some are not, some of the big scorers aren't scoring yet, hockey's a team game and they're getting contributions from everybody else. And I think that's good for this team too.
And being dropped into that when everyone else has chemistry is tough as well. So it could take a few games for them to get in there. And it's all about building good habits and all that too for those players. And the way the Canucks are playing right now, it's so sloppy and just frustrating. Like, it's hard to build good habits at that point. So I think at this point, getting Podkolzin and Höglander and even keeping Rathbone down there is good because you're going to help them build good habits, and it's going to be a strong team.
Yeah. Yep. I agree. Yeah. And that it's good. Just some talk from the Wranglers about Kevin Rooney and the adjustment he had to make from going down to the minors. I imagine Höglander is feeling, and even to a lesser extent, Podkolzin would have felt that as well. It's probably an adjustment. He's getting sent down to the minors. You feel a little, you don't feel good about yourself at the time, and it takes a little bit of while. So I think just give Höglander some time; he'll be fine.
Oh yeah, I have no issues. I think he's got from everything I've seen, I feel like he's have the right attitude towards it, and I think he'll come out better, looking better from it.
Yep. Yeah. By the way, they're in Calgary on the 2nd of January. I'm not sure if you were aware of that.
I know.
Okay. And Will Lockwood, by the way, 12 goals to lead the way for the Abbotsford Canucks. In terms of the Canucks, anything else we need to get into?
No, I think it's just they're currently down 4-2 at the end of the second, and
yeah,
Petey's got a goal and an assist.
Yeah. Meanwhile, the Flames are in LA, tied at 1 currently, midway through the second against the LA Kings. Just looking here as we're doing this, we've got I don't want that. Anyway, it's 1-1. the Milan Lucic became a issue again, not because of Milan Lucic created issues, but Lucic ended up on the line with Nazem Kadri and Jonathan Huberdeau, and of course Matthew Phillips again not in the lineup. And I'm just looking to see if he's in the lineup right now. I'll as I do that. Anyway, Lucic does score in 2 consecutive games against San Jose, and the Flames come away with a couple wins against the San Jose Sharks. You could argue the Sharks are a bad team and the Flames should win, but yeah, where am I going with this? Ultimately, the Backlund, Mangiapane, Coleman line did play more than the Kadri line. So I technically kind of feel like Backlund right now is more considered the number 2 and Kadri line is number 3. So in one sense, I'm like, he's not a top 6 forward and he only played 12 minutes. That being said, I'm having a tough time arguing for Milan Lucic to be anything other than the bottom 3 pair. And it's so kind of don't know where I'm at with Milan Lucic. I'm really happy he scored a couple goals. I think it's been a rough year for him. I don't think it's been easy that he's been scratched. I think Sutter relies on him a lot on and off the ice. And but I guess ultimately what I've come to the conclusion to, Sean, is this forward group is not ultimately as good as people wanted to admit. And the fact that you have to put Milan Lucic in a top 9 role at all says that the Flames may not be they're not as good as people think, and there's some work that needs to be done. And the other issue with that is Ruzicka did play very well for a while, but his play stepped off, and what are you going to do ultimately?
Yeah. Well, I'm looking at the last game when the Flames beat the Sharks 7-3. The top line was the in terms of time on ice together was the Backlund line.
Yeah.
The second line was the Kadri line, and third line center Elias Lindholm. They're all right there. They're all within a shift length of each other. So I don't they're all just essentially they're all playing around the same amount of ice time. I think consternating. Trying to label them at this point, I think is a bit nitpicky in my opinion. I think I went into that was the same approach I went into the season with the Canucks when I looked at the lineup when they were going to try and run the Miller, Horvat, Petey line. They're like, well, who's the third line center? I'm like, no one is. They're all going to play around the same amount, and whoever's playing better is going to play more.
Yeah.
But with Lucic, yeah, I think that's not good. I don't think it's ideal that you're going to have aging Milan Lucic and you're on a top line. I think he's a fourth liner at best right now, and I think maybe you get a couple good games out of him in a top line role, but I think it's if you're gonna long term, they need to find another solution.
Yeah. And yeah, that's ultimately what that problem. That's ultimately where that problem is. Yeah, by the way, he assisted on Jonathan Huberdeau's goal, so he has a 3-game point streak now, Milan Lucic. Anyway, but I'll watch that game later. Yeah, I just and they haven't seen enough, obviously, from Matthew Phillips that such a rock and a hard place. I know that everybody wanted Matthew Phillips up, but we kind of assumed that what we assumed and probably thought has happened, has happened, and that Matthew Phillips is sitting in the press box eating popcorn and getting an NHL paycheck. But ultimately, that's unfortunately, that's where we're at this particular point. And I guess you could say Sutter is being stubborn. I guess you could argue, but I don't. I guess I just look back. I haven't seen. I don't know if Phillips showed enough to crack that lineup.
Yeah, but I feel like Phillips is the type of player who's not, unless he's going to go out there and score, like right off the bat, he's going to be someone who the coaches are going to take time to warm up to.
Yeah,
in the NHL because of his because of his size. Like if he's not scoring, what's he doing? He's not creating offense. What's he doing? He needs to create offense to stay in the lineup. And if he's not doing that, then I think Matthew Phillips is one of those players who I think needs to be on a team that's going to have a coach who's going to give players like him longer looks, who their coach isn't coaching for to make the playoffs. I know it sounds stupid because I think all coaches are doing that, but like they're willing to give the younger players a longer look as opposed to Sutter, who's set in his ways. He knows what players he thinks are successful in this league, and he's going to stick with those players. And Matthew Phillips isn't it. Whether you agree or disagree with it, that's the truth of the matter.
That's the fact of the matter. Yeah. Yeah.
And if you can't see that and all you're doing is arguing, saying you should play the kids, I think it's time for you to take a step back and take a wider look at hockey. Just going to say that straight out.
Well, one place, that bridges into something, but one thing I want to say. You know where Matthew Phillips might be a good fit that I could see him maybe having at least an opportunity to move forward? Because what you said there, we've seen Martin St. Louis do that with Cole Caulfield, and that has paid dividends for Cole Caulfield. Wonder if Montreal would be a good fit for him.
Maybe.
That's one place where
But how many small players can you have on a roster and be successful? I hate saying that because I would love to see skill show a lot more than maybe it does now, but hockey's also a physical intimidation game. And you can intimidate with skill, but if you're not doing that, and Matthew Phillips really hasn't.
But that's part of I guess one of my struggles and questions, I guess, when I think about Matthew Phillips is I don't okay, sure, you can argue Arizona because that's the pit of the armpit of the NHL, but I don't know if that works for him. I don't see a lot. I mean, he already passed waivers, so there's not a lot of teams that I could see.
Yeah, but I take that with a grain of salt.
No. But what my point being is I just don't see a lot of teams with what you're saying. There's not a lot of teams that I think that Matthew Phillips is a fit on right now. That's ultimately it.
You know where I think Anaheim would be a good spot for him. But again, take the waivers thing out. Just put that away because that was more about timing than anything else. He went through waivers in the preseason when everyone was going through waivers, and they weren't going to pick someone up unless they had identified that player's fitting a need. And a lot of the time, those teams are going to have other players that they think are going to fit that already in camp.
No, but I guess my point is I just ultimately do think for the most part, and most teams, there may be a few teams, most teams, I think right now, unfortunately, Matthew Phillips would struggle to get into an NHL lineup.
I think he just needs someone who's a team that's willing to take a chance on him and let him play 10 games in a row and put him in a position to succeed and work his way into it. And maybe not right now, but maybe later on when you have teams falling out and teams selling and looking for the future, he might be someone that they look at.
Yeah.
Like San Jose, I think he'd be another spot for him would be San Jose because of he's going to be cheap as well, and they've got a very expensive back end.
Yeah, and yeah. Speaking of right shot defensemen that people are going to be inquiring about, it'll be interesting to see what happens with Erik Karlsson when it comes to the trade deadline. But
I don't expect, if he does move, it will if you expect it's going to be a big
it's going to be underwhelming.
Yes, that contract, how as good as he's playing right now, that contract's not. I don't think that contract ages well, and that's a very big risk to take for a team. Unless you know that he's a key piece that can put you over the hump and win you a cup.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, to bridge to where I was going, Brett Sutter, congratulations to him. It's one of the few things, it's professional hockey. He played 1,000 AHL games. That's 1,000 more than I've ever played in professional hockey. So congratulations to him. I think kudos for that. Captain of the Calgary Wranglers. In a lot of ways, the other side of this argument of bringing up the kids is in the Flames organization anyway. When you've got a guy like Brett Sutter willing to mentor kids like Connor Zary and Jacob Pelche, I think it's okay to let them marinate another extra year, and you can still learn some pretty good habits for a guy that's played professional hockey. Maybe not all NHL hockey, but professional hockey. And I think that that's a very valuable lesson to your young players. And I'm willing, even with Matthew Phillips, I think that even another time in the minors to let that marinate and let that sit, I don't think hurts anybody at all. But I also was thinking a little bit about this, and just in terms of where the Wranglers are at, and just in a bigger picture here, they've won like 14 of the last 16. Dustin Wolf's 18-4. They're currently, what are they? They're sitting second, 18-7-1, 37 points in the Pacific Division. They would play the Abbotsford Canucks in the first round of the playoffs if they were matched up, I believe. What would a Calder Cup run do for the Wranglers?
I mean, it's good experience for the kids there, Kev.
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking that this wouldn't be such a bad thing.
Why would it be bad? Like, playing hockey is good. Playing playoff hockey is even better. Why would you even question that?
No. I'm thinking that this is just something that just kind of popped in my head. I mean, we haven't talked a lot about it because our focus is always on the NHL, but there's a legitimate opportunity and just in terms of maybe just from the business side of this, it's great for the kids because you're obviously for the team because you're getting playoff experience, and the AHL is a tough trophy. The Calder Cup is a tough trophy to win, so that run is a pretty lengthy run for sure, and that helps in terms of your player confidence. But the other thing that I was sort of thinking a little bit about too, and wanted to see where you were at with this. We've talked a lot about the arena situation in Calgary, and of course, the Saddle Dome is the busiest rink right now, one of the busiest rinks in North America because you have the Flames, the Wranglers, and the Hitmen. And I think we've talked about how unideal that actually truly is. I wonder if a Calder Cup run could help. You don't think that helps an arena situation in Calgary?
No. Unless they're selling out the Dome 16,000, 18,000, which they won't. No. It's the Flames that will make it's the Flames, the actual Calgary Flames that will make or break it.
No, what I mean, not like sorry, let me reword this. Not the Flames arena, but in terms of getting another Wrangler
a secondary one.
secondary one. Sorry, it wasn't clear there. Trying to get that secondary rink that has been a need in Calgary.
No,
it wouldn't help, eh?
No, I don't think so. Unfortunately, I think that'll be driven by once if I don't. I don't see it. Unfortunately, I know we desperately need one. I think it'd be way better for both the Wranglers, the Hitmen, the Roughnecks, all to play in a smaller arena. Like I love going to Hitmen games, but I absolutely hate that it's just a cavernous. It feels so cavernous when you go there. Play in a small find a build a small arena, refurbish Max Bell or something. Make it more of an experience as opposed to just going to watch the kids play in the Flames arena. Because when you go to those, it's like half the concessions aren't open. You've got everyone scattered around 2 levels when you should be making sure that everyone's as close to the action as possible. I don't see it. I hope I'm wrong because I think it'd be the city desperately needs a second smaller arena because but I don't see it because I think they're quite happy keeping everyone under one roof. The other thing, the only way I would agree with you, Kev, is if the Wranglers were like the Wranglers team was not part of Calgary Sports and Entertainment. And they had different owners who had different agenda than the Flames ownership.
Yeah, I it's unfortunate. I think that those type of secondary arenas, I think would help. And my theory was a Calder Cup run would be great politics it would help politically to prove a need because there would be attendance and all of that sort of stuff. But from what you're telling me, that's not the case. And that's really too bad.
Well, if there's attendance and they're go, why don't you just play in the new arena that they're going to be building eventually? Why? The only way it would happen is if the city, out of its own volition, built a 5,000 seat arena, 6,000 seat arena, and let them play in there for free. Because otherwise, the Flames basically run the dome. Calgary Sports and Entertainment essentially runs the dome.
I guess the unfortunate thing is you lose that opportunity to create your own sort of identity and atmosphere, and I think that's a huge loss. Look,
I think the best opportunity for that secondary arena right now is on the Tsushima Reserve and building off of what they currently have.
Yeah, okay. Well, I tried.
Sorry, Kev. I started to cut you off and basically just shut it down. I agree with you. I think it would be great. I think Calgary needs a new big arena for the Flames to play in and have concerts in. We need a secondary arena where the Hitmen and the Wranglers can play, as well as the Roughnecks. And we need a new football stadium.
Yes, you do. Yes.
So until we have someone who's willing to pony up, and then again, the problem is guess who owns all those teams?
The Flames.
Exactly. So until they're willing to pony up and build something on their own, we're going to be stuck in this. Will they? Won't they build a new? Well, they will at some point. New arena, but yeah.
But I ultimately think a Wrangler run would be good for the city. I mean, it's not the Flames. It's not going to be, it wouldn't be that hype, of course, but I still think it would be good for them to establish that relationship within Calgary in their first year. So, you know, and again, just in terms of the hockey side of it, I think excuse me, it really allows your players to grow in a playoff run. And I could see from a Sutter, if you're a Matthew Phillips fan, him having a really good playoff in a Calder in would endear him more to Sutter than right now. That's that if you want Matthew Phillips to stick around with the Flames and you want him to succeed, I think the best option for him right now is continue to play with the Wranglers and go on a playoff run, and we'll see what happens. Because he's definitely a guy, even if he doesn't end up with the Flames, you see him go on a long playoff run. He's found money. Someone will take a chance on him.
Yep.
Yeah, that's where we're at with that. I don't know. Is there anything else with the Flames we need to talk about? I think it's been kind of a...
Yeah, I think that's just I think wait and see what the Flames do to bolster their lineup, whether it's a addition on the back end or up front or both.
Yep. Yeah, that's interesting to see where this team grows as they fight for a playoff spot. Yeah, we'll see where they're at for sure. In terms of other NHL to get to, Stuart Skinner signed. The Oilers extended Stuart Skinner 3 years, 2.6. He actually makes more than Dan Vladar, a little bit more than Dan Vladar right now. Felt like in a lot of ways this was sort of a let's get the fans off our back because we're not really playing that good right now, and our goaltending has not been ultimately as good as we hoped it would be ultimately, and the fans really like Stuart Skinner, so let's get this done now and get some good PR. In some ways, felt like that.
He's played good enough. He deserves the contract.
Absolutely.
It's plain and simple. I think trying to spin that way, I think is, I don't know. I think he's just played good enough to deserve a contract.
The Oilers are a better team in front of Skinner than Campbell. Like when I watch them, I feel like they are a better team. That's why I think Stuart Skinner is going to take. That's why I've said Stuart Skinner is going to take the reins over Jack Campbell at some point here. Yeah. I guess there's we can have a whole debate about Jack Campbell another time, I guess, in terms of if that's been a good contract or not. Ultimately, the other problem that the Oilers have had for most of the year is it's great that McDavid and Draisaitl are scoring, and even Nugent Hopkins, by the way, he is scoring. Nugent Hopkins is having a good year, but they are not getting enough from their other guys. And that's if they're going to go anywhere, they need that depth scoring to pick up.
Yep.
That's kind of where I'm at with the Oilers.
Agreed.
I think teams played okay. We know McDavid and Draisaitl are going to score. We just can't let them go off and go nuts. But if you get some depth scoring, that's when the Oilers become a little bit dangerous, and they're not necessarily getting that as much as they should.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. But yeah, and then the Senators signed Artem Zub. I think a good signing too. That defense going forward, you've got Shabbat, Zub, Bernard Docker, Jake Sanderson coming up. The pieces are in place for the Ottawa Senators to be a good team. The question is if they ultimately take that step. And ultimately, I think what do you end up doing with Alex DeBrincat too? I think is the other thing, I guess, what you end up doing there. But yeah, I don't know. I don't have an issue with this. I didn't really have an issue with the Dube signing either.
It's about market value.
Yeah. Yeah. But they've certainly been playing better lately overall. They're still a long way from getting anywhere, and they have a ton of injuries. Like Stützle and Norris, even Zub is out here too. So, but yeah, there's something. They're developing something in Ottawa that's, I think, really interesting. But yeah, some work to do there. Did you see Michael Bunting get shoved by a linesman?
Those JFLs are getting feisty now.
Yeah.
Just get off the ice. No, fine. I'll push you off the ice.
Get away from me.
Things got a little out of hand. That's all.
Yep. Yeah. I wasn't a big deal, but I thought it was kind of humorous. Also thought it was humorous that Cale Makar decided to waive off a penalty. Could Cale Makar be a referee in the future?
No.
And then Matthew Tkachuk went Matthew Tkachuk on Nico Hischier after the Devils beat the Panthers last night. I guess ultimately where I stand is I'm not surprised. I'm kind of not surprised that Matthew Tkachuk did it. I understand why he did it because they injured Barkov. Hischier's not a dirty player, but I don't know. I guess I've come to expect this from Matthew Tkachuk. I'm not outraged by it.
It's just, yeah, that's just scrum hockey that Tkachuk thrives in. That's all. He's a rat, and he's doing rat-like things. If he was doing that against my team, I'd be angry.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess, Mike, I still don't. My thing with Matthew Tkachuk is it took me a long while to get over that horrendous performance against the Oilers, ultimately. But
he just didn't show up.
He didn't. No, he did not. So the Boston Bruins did an investigation. This is a bit confusing, but I'll read this statement involving the Mitchell Miller situation, and because they did an independent investigation about the handling of Mitchell Miller, and it kind of went. I don't think it was really ultimately. When I read this, I'm not surprised by it. But the team says the report showed no misconduct by the team, but recommended a series of steps to be implemented. And then there's a list of steps, including, due diligence, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Establish timetables, establish documentation, tracking, yada, yada, yada. And I guess, this was just a horrendous situation. The Bruins made a massive mistake. But my understanding is ultimately from the contract situation, I think he is still getting paid, but my belief is they will buy him out at the end of the season, but they can't not pay him now because they gave him the contract, and they're kind of stuck with their horrendous decision ultimately, and they can't fix it until the end of the year.
Yes, because they can't put him on unconditional waivers because he has to agree to that. So he's just going to take the money and run.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, I don't really know in terms of, I guess, I wasn't expecting anything different from Boston or any other organization that would have made the same mistake, I think anybody would have wrote these same things. Like I guess I understand why people are outraged that Mitchell Miller is still getting paid, but I guess the Bruins fucked up, and that's the bottom line. And
Yep.
yeah. Anything else we need to? Is there anything we didn't get into here that you wanted to discuss?
No, I think we got it all.
Okay. World Juniors coming up on Boxing Day. That should be interesting. And
Hopefully we get a whole tournament this year.
Well, the nice thing, yeah, I think that will happen, and I that will happen for sure. The one thing I just have 3% of me wonders is if that Canucks Oiler game happens tomorrow. And I only say that just because of the road and the weather conditions. There are delayed flights out of Vancouver. I mean, I know that they
canceled.
What's canceled?
All flights going in and out of YVR are canceled starting at 11 o'clock to 11:40 tonight, going into the afternoon tomorrow.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering. That's why I'm wondering if that game gets postponed tomorrow.
Yeah, I could see it.
Yeah. Anyway, we will. Okay, so Christmas, we're not going to have. This is not our Christmas podcast. We're going to have a fun little New Year's time here. When next week we'll get Tyler back, we'll get Chris back. For the love of God, well, if someone has to drag Devin to the podcast, we might have to do that. But we'll have a fun not that this wasn't fun, but we'll get everybody back together and have some good laughs and all that good shit as we hit into the new year. Hopefully here next week we'll plan for that. Is that a fair plan?
We'll see what we can do for next week. Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough with the schedule and all that sort of stuff, but we'll leave it here.
Holidays and everything, so.
Yeah, and Chris is traveling. I think Tyler's dealing with snow as well up north, and Devin's busy. Everybody's been really busy. So, yeah, that's the way we are. But how do we follow you?
Yeah, you can follow me at Beardy Canuck 03 on Twitter, and Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to everyone.
And Chris is Schneid's, SCHNAIDZ, Tyler TNOBLE, Devin Gordhow 09. I am KEVOLE, Shifts and Pucks, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. Subscribe wherever you get your audio, as well as on the Area 51 Sports Network. We wish you, your friends, your family, your significant others all a Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and bye for now.